When the hunter strikes and teeth sink deep, the prey does not surrender. Quietly claws slash, bodies thrash, and survival drives them to wound the predator, sometimes fatally. So it was when the Dark Enforcer of the Sith met rare Jedi who refused to fall meekly before him. Once the Radiant Chosen One, now a figure of black steel and fury, he carved through survivors of the Purge like an unstoppable machine. Yet not all bent so easily. Some stood tall, blades ignited, and forced him into the crucible of true battle. In these duels, he staggered, scarred, and at times nearly broken, victories torn from the edge of defeat. What follows is the chronicle of those who pushed the Dark Lord to his limits, testing not only his strength, but the fractured soul buried beneath the mask. The tale kicks off with a challenge, ranking the toughest opponents by scoring their duels with the Dark Lord using two measures: how fiercely the Jedi fought back and how much damage he endured in the clash. Only Jedi make the cut, leaving out all those wild encounters with experiments, twisted copies, and resurrected foes. The focus is clear: which defenders of the light truly pushed him to the edge. And the first spotlight falls on a daring Jedi known as the Dark Woman, once a gray outsider who rose in the Order before the wars. Not gray in neutrality, but a rebel spirit defying the Council's mold, her beliefs rooted deeply in the light, unlocking mysterious powers that few could ever touch. A mysterious Jedi of her time, she could vanish from sight and slip through solid walls as if they were nothing, often using this trick just to walk into or out of rooms or even to end conversations without a word. Her bond with living beings was profound, and through her mastery of altering the environment, she could bend nature itself to her will. Beyond these gifts, she stood out as a masterful duelist, considered superior to most of her peers. Yet she earned the ominous title of the Dark Woman, not because she embraced darkness, but because of her unorthodox beliefs. She provoked the hidden shadows within others, stirring suppressed anger in young Jedi to force them to confront what they feared inside themselves. Rejecting the idea of burying darkness, she insisted it must be faced and conquered. This belief shaped her brutal yet effective training style, methods so harsh that many Jedi called them barbaric. Still, her results were undeniable, and the Council entrusted her with the most difficult Padawans those others had already given up on. 2 Jedi burned with vengeance, yet their rage was cooled by the Dark Woman, a figure who chose shadows over command. Far from flawless, she carried the weight of her Padawan's fall into the life of a hunter, yet she herself slipped into the unseen, trading the role of warrior for that of spy. Through the chaos of war, she moved like a phantom, vanishing so completely that her trail disappeared from history. It was this same mastery of concealment that let her escape the slaughter of her kind, surviving when others fell. In exile, hidden on a world of overgrown forests, she devoted herself to unraveling the secrets of the Force, seeking answers for the betrayal that had shattered her order, and in that solitude she uncovered the key to life beyond death. She endured wave after wave of purge, unseen and unbroken, until the age of rebellion, when her presence, long buried in silence, returned to the galaxy. By this time, the hunt had reached its bitter end. The Jedi nearly erased from existence, and even the Dark Enforcer had abandoned his search. Years of pursuit had drained his strength, leaving him unable to uncover the last survivors, including the elusive Dark Woman. Yet fate shifted when one of the Emperor's shadowed agents uncovered her location, a revelation that reignited the fire of the hunt. Summoned before their master, the armored warrior stood in silence as the truth was spoken. Ana Kuro had been found. Shock rippled through him, for she had slipped through his grasp despite decades of relentless pursuit. The Emperor praised the subtlety of his other servant, whose methods had succeeded where brute force had failed. She demanded the right to strike the final blow, but the towering figure of black rejected her claim, his voice like thunder in the throne room. This was no ordinary prey, it was a remnant of the old order, a quarry he had hunted across a lifetime, and no rival, however favored, would deny him the chance to finish what he had begun. The Emperor's patience snapped, silencing the squabbling with a decree. The Dark Enforcer alone would strike down the last defiant Jedi woman. No risk could be taken with her survival, for a single spark might rally the growing rebellion. Tasked with the hunt, he descended upon Khafram 5, his senses guiding him through the tangled jungle until he reached a hidden oasis, where she stood already waiting. She had felt his shadow the instant his ship touched the soil. Their words circled around a rare extinct plant she nurtured, but beneath the surface their exchange was a duel of philosophy, a reflection of the Jedi's fate itself. At last, words ended. The warrior of darkness drew his blade, striking as she turned. Amethyst light flared in response, her saber catching his blow behind her head. The force of his strike drove her to one knee, and yet with practiced agility she slipped away from a swing meant to sever her neck. Time and age had not dulled her edge, and the hunter recognized that the prey before him was far from broken. He praises her skill, calling her a worthy rival even after all these years, and she fires back with a sly remark that he's still impressive for someone mostly made of metal. With dazzling acrobatics, she unleashes a flurry of strikes, proving she's as sharp as ever. He admires her once more, lamenting that she could have been a brilliant apprentice of the dark path, even hinting they might have been unstoppable allies, before hurling a storm of boulders her way. She slices through the barrage with ease, declaring the strength of the light, and then summons nature itself, vines and thorns lashing out to bind him. Striking hard, she aims to end it, but he blocks, rips free, and surges forward, their blades clashing in a furious dance. Suddenly, she vanishes, only to reappear with a cunning ambush from behind the waterfall, catching him off guard and knocking his weapon aside, leaving the Dark Titan momentarily staggered. She had underestimated the monstrous strength he wielded. Her wrist seized before her strike could land, and with a contemptuous throw she was cast aside as his weapon flew back to his hand. He pressed forward, overwhelming her not only with his blade but with words that stripped away her defiance, cornering her like the others before her. She strained against his power until at last her tricks failed, narrowly escaping a fatal stroke as his weapon split a great tree in two, its fall redirected by the force to crush her beneath its weight. Broken and bleeding, she could only look up as he raised his blade for the final strike, declaring there was no escape from the darkness. Yet, with a mocking reply, her form dissolved into nothing, leaving only an empty cloak as he tore at the fabric in confusion. Then, from the shadows, her spectral image emerged, untouchable, a ghost defying his rage. His blade cut through nothing but air as she named him not by the mask he wore, but by the name he thought long buried Skywalker. She was a powerful telepath, heir to a formidable lineage, yet scarred by the terrors of the Clone Wars, retreating into the Jedi Temple where she buried herself in the archives, hunting for secrets of the Sith, and a way to uncover the hidden master of the dark side. When the night of betrayal came, she watched in horror as the temple fell, fear driving her into the shadows beneath Coruscant, where she survived in exile. But her grief hardened into resolve, and months later she devised a bold deception approaching the Dark Master through hologram, feigning devotion and vowing to slay his own apprentice to earn a place at his side. Amused, the Master agreed, knowing she could never triumph, and unleashed his enforcer to confront her. Beneath the ruins of the temple, the armored giant descended into the underworld, declaring her ruse exposed, her game already lost. Yet from the darkness, the hunter himself was ensnared in an ambush, the clash between predator and prey about to ignite. She was a powerful telepath, heir to a formidable lineage, yet scarred by the terrors of the Clone Wars, retreating into the Jedi Temple where she buried herself in the archives, hunting for secrets of the Sith and a way to uncover the hidden master of the dark side. When the night of betrayal came, she watched in horror as the temple fell, fear driving her into the shadows beneath Coruscant, where she survived in exile. But her grief hardened into resolve, and months later she devised a bold deception, approaching the Dark Master through hologram, feigning devotion and vowing to slay his own apprentice to earn a place at his side. Amused, the Master agreed, knowing she could never triumph, and unleashed his enforcer to confront her. Beneath the ruins of the temple, the armored giant descended into the underworld, declaring her ruse exposed, her game already lost. Yet from the darkness, the hunter himself was ensnared in an ambush, the clash between predator and prey about to ignite. The twisted creatures lunged from the shadows, controlled through the Force, but the armored Sith cut them down with effortless precision. The trap that followed, a crackling electronet, stunned him for a breath before his power ripped it apart. Then the hidden Jedi emerged, blade ignited, vengeance burning in her eyes. Though long removed from war, her skill was sharp, her spirit unbroken. She leapt, spun, and struck, even marking his armor with a slash across the back. Yet her heart faltered when his words echoed the revelation that she stood as the last of her kind. That moment of despair unbalanced her, and the Dark Lord's might surged. With a crushing wave of power, he hurled her into ruin, her defenses collapsing beneath the relentless storm of his assault. In a storm of hammering strikes, the young Jedi fought with all her strength, but soon the Dark Lord's hand closed around her throat, lifting her high before pulling her into the crimson blade. In those final moments, fear whispered that the light would die with her. Yet the Force answered with visions of the future, of a sun rising, of rebels defying tyranny, of the Dark Lord redeemed in his last breath. Knowing she was not the final hope, she surrendered peacefully, passing into the Force with serenity. He, however, felt her calm departure like a wound, unsettled enough to carry it back to his master. Though her life was brief in the duel, she carved her place in legend, for she struck a blow where so few ever could. Even more, she touched his mind, leaving him disturbed and uncertain, while she departed in peace. He leapt in confusion, she left fulfilled. The next clash steps up in intensity as the tale shifts to a young Jedi named Ferrus Olin, a figure whose path stretches from the Clone Wars to the dawn of the Galactic Civil War. His journey unfolds mainly through the Jedi Quest and the Last of the Jedi series, where his life repeatedly intertwines with that of Anakin. Both trained as Padawans in the temple at the same time, their masters close allies, yet the two often clashed, Anakin frustrated by Ferrus's rigid devotion to Jedi principles. Their rivalry simmered even as they embarked on missions together, hunting a dangerous criminal whose ties reached back to the slaying of Master Yao. Alongside them were another master and apprentice duo, with Ferrus forging a close friendship with Darth Vader. But tragedy struck when her lightsaber, hastily repaired by Ferrus, drained too much energy in the heat of battle, leading to her untimely death and leaving Ferrus to bear the crushing weight of responsibility. In a storm of hammering strikes, the young Jedi fought with all her strength, but soon the Dark Lord's hand closed around her throat, lifting her high before pulling her into the crimson blade. In those final moments, fear whispered that the light would die with her, yet the Force answered with visions of the future, of a sun rising, of rebels defying tyranny, of the Dark Lord redeemed in his last breath. Knowing she was not the final hope, she surrendered peacefully, passing into the Force with serenity. He, however, felt her calm departure like a wound, unsettled enough to carry it back to his master. Though her life was brief in the duel, she carved her place in legend, for she struck a blow where so few ever could. Even more, she touched his mind, leaving him disturbed and uncertain, while she departed in peace. He leapt in confusion, she left fulfilled. With a gleam of intrigue, the Emperor promised the boy the very power to bring down the Dark Enforcer, accusing his servant of overreaching authority. With flattery laced like poison, he spoke of the boy's potential in the shadows, framing it as a chance to eclipse the black armored figure. It was no true conspiracy, but a test, and the boy took the bait, vowing in secret to infiltrate the Empire as a double agent. Trained one-on-one, he was taught to unleash the darkness, gifted forbidden lore within a holocron, and placed among the hunters of Jedi. Believing he was deceiving his master, the boy instead sank deeper into corruption, his obsession with the masked warrior consuming him. Driven by the hunger to unmask his enemy, he uncovered the tragedy of a fallen hero, the doomed love, and the fiery duel that birthed the monster. Armed with secrets and dark strength, he rushed headlong into battle, luring his foe into shattered ruins for a final confrontation. Within the vast halls of the temple, the clash began with the Jedi striking in a storm of energy, his blade turned aside with effortless ease. The dark figure withheld his true power, testing his opponent until the Jedi spoke, calling him by a name long buried, mocking his fall and accusing him of bitterness toward the council. Step by step, they fought their way toward the high chamber, where words cut as sharply as blades. Yet the Dark Lord did not falter. He abandoned the restraint, his strikes now swift and merciless, shocking the Jedi who thought the machine could not move with such speed. With each blow, he declared the truth. The man once known as Anakin was gone, and only the hunter remained. A predator who saw his foe not as an equal but as prey, bound to fall as so many had before. The battle raged in the shattered tower, the Emperor's shadow no longer shielding the Dark Lord as his opponent pushed forward with desperate cunning. In a reckless gamble, the challenger spoke of the woman from Mustafar, piercing the armored silence until the Dark Lord erupted with fury, warning him never to utter her name again. The air shook with his rage, the Sith holocron burning beneath the tunic of the one who now grasped what he had stirred. Instead of recoiling, he drank in that fury, twisting the very darkness meant to destroy him into his own weapon. With newfound power, he struck, forcing the duel into a storm of raw chaos as the Dark Lord hurled stones and wreckage in violent waves. The chamber became a maelstrom of destruction, and still the challenger taunted, calling him by the name he once bore, demanding if he had stood and watched as the woman he loved slipped away by his own hand. The clash exploded in chaos as the Dark Lord unleashed his fury, bringing the ceiling crashing down in a storm of destruction, yet still failing to trap his opponent. The Jedi absorbed that rage, twisted it in a blinding speed and precise strikes that scorched circuits and sent sparks flying. But when the Dark Lord hurled him against the wall with the Force, it seemed the end was near until visions flooded the Jedi's mind, showing him a temple bathed in peace, love, and justice. Time itself seemed to freeze as he faced his past, forgave himself, and chose compassion over vengeance, realizing he had been ensnared by a poisonous trap all along. Reclaiming the path of a true Jedi, he made his choice in the heat of battle, leaping past his enemy and vanishing through the shattered floor to fight another day. The encounter turned into a brutal clash as he tore the holocron from himself and hurled it away, the agony slowing him just long enough for Vader to close in. Vader's grip crushed his throat and slammed him into the wall with bone-shattering force, leaving him broken but not dead, as the light side shielded him from the final strike. Wounded and forced into hiding, he survived only to be discovered years later when Vader cut him down with ease. Their first duel, however, remained one of Vader's most difficult, not because of strength alone, but because of the torment it brought. The Jedi struck him, evaded him, and even turned his own dark knowledge against him, making Vader fight not just an enemy, but a mirror of what he once was. It only drove him to move swifter, more elusive, until the final strike drew near. In that shattered temple, the stage was set for a perfect storm, where a Jedi dared to twist the blade of memory and turn words into weapons, striking at the Dark Lord's mind as much as his body. The duel revealed how difficult the battle became when Vader faced not the calm defenses of the Order, but the fury of one trained to wield rage itself. As a Jedi, he had been no real challenge, yet armed with forbidden knowledge and the power of the dark, he became a problem Vader could not dismiss. Against such foes, time and effort stretched, the fight drawn longer, the victory less certain. Among those who troubled him, none pressed harder than the Master who cast aside diplomacy, training, and study, choosing only the blade. A warrior monk whose life was devoted to combat, he emerged from the High Republic as a formidable fighter and later embraced the Barash vow, retreating into exile long before the rise of the Empire. Bound by his oath, he endured the fall of his brethren during the Purge, sensing their deaths, yet unable to intervene. He honed his strength in solitude until the day the Dark Enforcer, stripped of a blade and commanded to claim a crystal through conquests, sought him out. To bleed a Kyber was to seize it from a fallen foe, and so the Sith turned his gaze to the lone master who had chosen exile, knowing that such a duel would determine not only the fate of the crystal, but whether the vow of silence could withstand the storm of the dark side. Amid the aftermath of the Purge, the dark figure arrived on the moon of Alderaan, where only 2 Jedi remained in their secluded monastery. As his starfighter descended under a storm of relics hurled from an ancient temple, he emerged unbroken and advanced toward the mountain path. There, the Jedi Master raised a wall to halt his progress and confronted him from the heights, demanding to know if he was the slayer of their kind. The reply came first as a crushing choke of the Force, broken just as swiftly, and then with a single word: yes. The Master pressed further, asking if death was his purpose here as well. Again came the answer: yes. A smile crossed the Jedi's face as he proclaimed his vow fulfilled, declaring the mountain itself a trial meant for Padawans. He would wait at the summit, where their true duel would begin. And so the Dark Lord started his climb, only to face the first trial as the floodgates opened, unleashing a torrent of water down the mountainside. Out of the valley, he was swept by the raging currents. Yet, with the power of the dark side, he parted the waters and endured with little harm. Scaling the mountain, he crossed a bridge only to be assaulted by monstrous winged predators, seizing them one by one with his unseen grip and smashing them down. While he battled, a watchful Jedi and his mechanical companion studied him, uncertain if the figure before them was truly a Sith. At last, the Jedi declared the path clear, ordering the droid to end all traps, for the summit would be their battleground. With his damaged cybernetic limb exposed, the dark figure climbed the final stair where his foe awaited. With a sudden surge, he hurled the Jedi from the staircase, then shattered the droid's arm in combat, casting the machine into the abyss and claiming its glowing blade as his own. On the windswept mountaintop, the duel began, the Jedi sensing the true hunger in his adversary's heart that he sought the weapon of light itself as steel and energy clashed beneath the storm. The electroblade he carried was no match for the true weapon of a Jedi, and the duel came only days after his body had been bound in armor, leaving him unready and weakened. Where legends once told of months of adjustment, here he staggered, still unfamiliar with his limbs, worn from drowning waters and assaults of monstrous wings. His movements faltered, his strikes slowed, and each crushing blow from the Jedi splintered his exposed leg until it snapped, driving him to his knees. In that moment, the Jedi declared disbelief that such a broken figure could have ended so many of his kind, vowing instead to uncover the master who must have commanded the slaughter. With a surge of power, he cast the armored figure from the mountain, leaving him broken below, and turned his steps toward the valley town beneath the Great Dam, where a family of mechanics, long his allies, prepared to aid in repairing the starfighter they had sheltered in secret for decades. The battle raged on as the fallen warrior clawed back from ruin, tearing apart the taunting machine and forging its broken pieces into his own shattered body, rising once more with a blade of crackling energy. Across the valley, the old master felt the tremor in the force and turned in disbelief, only to see the dark figure looming atop the dam, a shadow that summoned him with two chilling words: "You come." Their clash ignited again, sparks and steel echoing across the structure as the Jedi struck swift, cutting into his foe's shoulder and sending him crashing down. Just as hope glimmered, local guards appeared, demanding the duel cease to protect the city's heart, but they were hurled into the abyss without hesitation. The Jedi roared in fury, saving them with the Force and branding his enemy a monster. Yet in that act of mercy lay the weakness the Dark Lord had been waiting for. An opening that promised the fight was far from over. He had finally found what he was looking for. With clenched fist and a surge of the dark side, the armored figure shattered the towering reservoirs above the town, sending waves threatening to crush the helpless below. The Jedi, torn between duty and compassion, strained to hold them steady, pleading for mercy. But the Dark Warrior only mocked him, wrenching the weapon from his belt and seizing him by the throat, dangling him over the dam's edge. Gasping, the Jedi begged to die if only the people could be spared. Instead, the black-clad Lord twisted him to face the town, forcing his eyes open as the towers burst and the dam unleashed a torrent that drowned everything in its path. Only then did the Sith snap his neck and cast the broken body into the abyss. This duel had not been easily won, for the armored warrior was weakened by his new form and lack of a true blade, nearly undone by a master of such skill. Yet he turned the tide through cruelty, striking not at the Jedi's blade but at his heart, learning in blood and ruin the ruthless path he must walk. On the shattered stage of the second Death Star, the Dark Enforcer stood as both executioner and prisoner of his master's will, believing that by striking at the heart of his enemies he could break them. Yet now the trap had turned against him. The young Jedi, who had surrendered in the hope of sparing his companions, was forced to witness their suffering while the Sith Lord mocked him from his throne, daring him to unleash his fury. The apprentice lingered at the edge, torn between loyalty and a silent pride in the courage of his son, secretly hoping the boy would give in so that together they might topple the tyrant. At last, the Jedi seized his weapon and struck, only to be halted mid-blow by the armored giant whose instincts outweighed reason. For though he knew the Emperor's power could snuff out the boy in an instant, deeper still was the reflex born of decades in chains, an impulse that kept him bound, even as the shadow of rebellion stirred within his scarred soul. Chains still weighed on him, yet within his armored shell a storm brewed, the clash of loyalty to the shadows against the fragile hope offered by his son. Once an unstoppable terror, his strength now faltered, not only because his failing body decayed within the suit, but because doubt gnawed at the darkness he clung to. His strikes, once filled with merciless power, grew heavy and sluggish, his movements lacking the ferocity that had broken countless foes. Driven back, even cast down a staircase, he rose again, cunningly seeking to twist his opponent's compassion into a weapon, striking when defenses lowered. But the youth's instincts were too keen. The blade met each treachery, and the duel ascended into the rafters. There, the Jedi wielded a rare form of battle mind, not by taunting, but by reaching for the hidden soul within the armored giant, speaking to the man buried deep beneath. Yet the Dark Lord resisted, answering not with surrender, but by hurling his weapon to shatter the catwalk and drag the fight back into the storm of steel and shadows. The boy is hurled to the ground, his back pressed against cold steel as he slips into the shadows beneath the balcony, clinging to the hope of buying time. If he cannot reach his father's heart, perhaps the rebels will succeed while he holds the monster's gaze. But the tide shifts, and the Dark Warrior seizes the moment, turning the cruel art of Dunmuk against him. With venomous words, he whispers that surrender is the only path to save his friends, then pierces into the boy's thoughts, unearthing the truth of a sister. The threat is made. If the son will not fall, perhaps the daughter will, and that single spark ignites an inferno. Rage erupts, raw and untamed, sweeping aside all restraint. The boy's strikes crash down in a storm of fury, the once noble blade now nothing more than a weapon of wrath. The armored giant, master of countless duels, is driven back step by step, his skill drowned beneath the tempest of his son's anger. At last, the cyclone breaks him, and with a final savage blow, the boy severs his father's hand. Vengeance claimed in the very place where hope and despair collide. On Bespin, the clash unfolds with unexpected force as the Dark Warrior finds himself outmatched for the first time in decades. His opponent is swifter, sharper, and charged with youthful energy, pressing him in ways no Jedi had managed before. Age weighs upon the armored figure, just as it once burdened another master of the blade long ago, and the duel mirrors that moment when a Sith Lord watched from his throne, urging his apprentice to surrender to fury. At last, the warrior is overcome and defeated, yet spared by a choice his foe refuses to make. This marks a turning point in the Chronicle, for where once he stood against Jedi only to emerge scarred but victorious. From this moment onward, he faces battles that leave him not with triumph, but with survival alone. His next trial comes not against one opponent, but against 8, when he walks into the Jedi Conclave on Kessel, a struggle so fierce that even his survival was uncertain. A moment recorded in The Purge. The tale unfolds in Vader's first year, where he relentlessly hunts for his former master, determined to make him pay. His search leads him to a report that Obi-Wan would be among a secret gathering of Jedi on Kessel. In truth, 8 Jedi had assembled there to debate their next move, torn between staying true to the light or embracing the dark to fight the Sith. Their leader, Master Shede, secretly leaked the meeting to lure Vader, using the bait of Obi-Wan's presence. Unaware of his true identity, but knowing of his obsession, she only revealed the trap once the council began, leaving the others stunned. Suddenly, Vader stormed into the chamber, demanding Obi-Wan's whereabouts, only to be met by 8 blazing sabers ready to strike. She lunged from behind, only to be impaled straight through the chest and stripped of her weapon hand in a single, merciless strike. The others rushed in, but he brushed them aside with ease, sending one crashing into stone and cleaving another master in half with a savage vertical slash. Even when a towering warrior landed a blow against his back, the dark figure leapt to higher ground, towering above them all. One master revealed a hidden Cortosis dagger, hoping to end him by disabling his blade, but this was no ordinary foe. He shattered her defenses, wrenched the dagger from her grasp, and snapped her neck without hesitation. In that moment, her grand plan collapsed into nothingness. Hemmed in by the circle of Jedi, his armor cracked and his weapon lost. The Dark Warrior feigned surrender, his deep voice confessing their unexpected strength while his mind reached for weakness in their hearts. One of the Jedi raised a blade to end him, but another intervened, insisting on the code that forbade striking down the unarmed. Rage twisted resolve into betrayal as the first seized her weapon and cut her down, opening the door to darkness. In that instant, the warrior seized his chance, summoning his severed arm, still gripping the deadly blade, and hurling it through his foe's chest. Armed once more, he advanced, only to face the remaining 3, who, shaken by what they had witnessed, united as one with the Force. Rocks, metal, and debris whirled like a storm against him, and even the armored giant, wounded and staggering, struggled to endure the combined fury unleashed upon him. His armor lay in shreds, his body of metal and flesh crippled, yet the Dark Lord rose with defiance, vowing destruction upon those who surrounded him. At that moment, A storm of blaster fire erupted as the Emperor's Legion descended, cutting down the remaining Jedi and wrenching him from certain death. It was not victory born of his own might, but salvation forced upon him after disobedience to his master's command. Had he summoned the full storm of his rage, perhaps the outcome would have been different. Yet in truth, he stood broken, outnumbered, and moments from the end, the duel closed not by his blade, but by the hand of another. And so this reckoning is counted as his loss rescued, not triumphant. The shadow of defeat cast over him as the chronicles march on to battles where no rescue would come. In the closing chapters of this chronicle, the Dark Lord met not one, but two crushing defeats at the hands of the weapon he had forged. The original apprentice, scarred by years of torment and molded into a living battering ram, unleashed every ounce of power that had been drilled into him, turning the pain of his past into fury that finally brought his master low. That clash was vengeance long delayed, for the boy had watched his father fall beneath the blade of the very man who then bound him in chains of obedience. Yet even when a clone was created, trained with greater refinement and strength, the outcome remained the same. The armored giant was driven to the ground, stripped of victory, and left at the mercy of the Force. Both duels, bound together by the inevitability of downfall, revealed how the hunter could become the prey, and how the shadow of Anakin's sins rose to strike him through the very hand he once sought to control. It was a dark experiment born of cruel curiosity. How far could the Shadowed Master push the already monstrous power of his secret apprentice? Trained to mastery in the brutal art of Xian and the destructive currents of the Force, he was unleashed upon the galaxy, hunting survivors of the Purge one by one. Yet amidst the bloodshed, a fragile bond grew with his pilot, and for the first time he imagined a life beyond servitude, beyond being nothing more than a weapon. That dream shattered when betrayal struck, and the Master cast him into the void of space under the watchful gaze of the Emperor. But death was only an illusion, for in secret he was rebuilt in a hidden laboratory, his body reforged, though his loyalty wavered. Bound once more yet torn within, he gathered allies, rebels, leaders, and even broken Jedi, planting the seeds of a movement that would shake the Empire itself. He had been sent on a mission of death, yet along the path the warrior discovered lessons in what it meant to be a true Jedi, taught by the blind master who challenged his heart. As his loyalty wavered and his spirit turned, he still sought to fulfill the task handed down by the Dark Lord, only to learn that his trust had been wasted, for the mission itself was a lie. After rallying senators to the cause of rebellion, he was betrayed, left broken, told he was nothing more than a disposable tool in a scheme to crush freedom before it could rise. The Dark Master returned with his own master to preside over the capture and execution of the rebels upon the incomplete battle station. But what neither expected was the apprentice's return. Ordered to finish the job and end the boy once and for all, the armored giant faced his former student in a corridor where words were exchanged before the apprentice revealed a new blue blade, the symbol of his chosen path. Their clash became not just a test of strength, but of destiny itself, the duel filled with echoes of battles past, as teacher and student collided in a storm of power, betrayal, and defiance. He had trained under the shadow of the faceless master in the black suit, honing a refined style that fused the grace of Ataru, the endurance of Sisu, and the precision of Makashi. He had endured wild assaults, outlasted psychological torment, and believed himself prepared for anything. But the first strike shattered that illusion, a blow of such weight that it nearly tore the weapon from his grasp. Convinced he knew every trick, he never imagined his master had restrained his true power for decades. Now the mask was lifted, and the full storm of a Sith Lord was unleashed. The opening strikes thundered with raw might, rattling his body as a hail of objects surged at him from every side. For a fleeting instant, the onslaught drove him back, until a burst of repulse scattered it all. What followed was no dance of feints or probing defenses, but a deadly exchange where every strike sought only one end: death. For the first time, master and apprentice faced each other stripped of deception, each revealing the full measure of their power. Strong and relentless, the apprentice moved with speed and cunning, clashing with the Dark Lord in a storm of fury where lightsabers were only part of the battle. Invisible hands gripped for throats, debris turned into deadly missiles, and even the floor tore itself apart beneath their struggle. Harnessing lightning through his blade, the apprentice became the embodiment of raw power, forcing his master to strike with nothing less than lethal intent. Yet when the shadows of the dark side urged him on, he resisted, calling instead upon the light to find his path. The Dark Lord's chokehold was shattered, his form hurled back by the Force, and in that moment the apprentice declared he no longer hated, but pitied the one who had sought to shape him into a monster. Freed from rage, he struck true for the first time, cleaving into the black armor and cutting across the respirator, pressing forward with unrelenting precision as the duel reached its turning point. The duel reached its breaking point as a telekinetic strike tore the weapon from the Dark Lord's grasp, hurling him into the air while steel and fire battered his body from every side. He struggled to resist, but the assault was merciless, crushing him beneath massive cylinders until his armor was shattered and his form exposed. His mask was torn away and his ruined body was lifted, smashed against a blazing shield, then hurled through glass into the throne room where he collapsed as little more than a smoking wreck. Here, the Master of Shadows was not simply defeated but utterly broken, overwhelmed by the very creation he once forged. His opponent, now wielding light as a weapon, stood in control of emotion and fate, leaving the Dark Lord mangled and stripped to his core, wires and flesh revealed. There exists a darker path, where vengeance extends the fight and the Master falls by another hand, but in the true course of events, the light prevails, leaving him standing yet crippled, his strength extinguished in the halls of the Death Star. He pushed himself to unleash nothing less than full power, and though he never revealed all his secrets, the apprentice sought out knowledge on his own. When he returned as a Jedi, he surpassed anything the Dark Lord had ever faced. The irony was brutal. Trained to be a Jedi hunter, he chose instead to wield his Sith-forged strength as a Jedi. In one of their earliest clashes, the Dark Lord was beaten without mercy, a rare sight with no room for doubt. Yet their next encounter burned less fiercely, and this time the Master escaped with far fewer wounds. Then came the creation of the clone, codenamed 1138, built as the perfected version of the original. While whispers suggest 1138 might actually be the true one, here he is treated as nothing more than a clone. Crafted to be nearly twice as strong and gifted real Sith training, he was shaped not just into a fearsome warrior, but a true assassin steeped in the forbidden arts. He was shaped with harsher methods and darker lessons, molded into a warrior far stronger than before. Yet the demand for blind obedience faltered, for the clone still carried memories and feelings that could not be erased. Breaking free from confinement, he sought out his lost allies, his love, and the Jedi who once guided him, only to confront once more the question of who he truly was. Choosing the light, he defied the will of the Master who had forged him, but that Master was not yet ready to let go. A trap was set, with his beloved taken to draw him back into the shadows. On Kamino, the halls of the cloning facility whispered with visions of his past as he walked among endless reflections of himself suspended in tanks, each one a cruel reminder of what he was meant to be. The dark figure who had shaped his fate struck and vanished again and again, using deception, illusions, and phantom foes drawn from memory, seeking to twist his heart and lure him once more to the darkness. Disguised as himself, the duel began with a deception, for the first figure struck down was no more than a shadow. In the depths of the cloning facility, the Dark Lord revealed his presence, drawing his apprentice into yet another clash. Their blades clashed upon high terraces, each strike tearing apart the platforms beneath them, yet the Master fought only to corral the apprentice further inside. There he unleashed the unfinished clones, forcing the warrior to battle those who bore his same memories and torment. Conflict filled his heart as he faced his brothers, knowing they shared his pain, until at last he was driven to annihilate them all with a storm of power, ending their suffering. Blade met blade once more as the Dark Lord sent wave after wave of abominations, pressing his foe to the brink of madness. Retreating upon a droid, he lured the apprentice onto the storm-lashed platforms of Kamino, all while concealing his true design. When the demand for his captive's fate rang out, the Dark Lord turned aside, revealing her bound in his grasp, lifted by the crushing hand of the Force, and with cold menace demanded surrender. On the storm-lashed world, the clone cast aside his blades and fell to his knees, bound by love and desperation, just as the Dark Master had foreseen. The threat against the woman was a chain too strong, a shadow of the torment he himself had once endured. Commands were issued: find the lost general, embrace the shadows, strike down the rebels, or watch her perish. Yet as the Master spoke, the woman seized a fallen weapon and struck, only to be hurled through glass by a crushing wave of power, her fate uncertain. A scream tore from the clone as fury consumed him, sabers igniting once more, his wrath clashing with the steel of his master's will. Thrown from the spire, he landed amid the storm's fury, where lightning-fed engines roared beneath his feet. There, rage sharpened his strength, and his onslaught became savage. The dark figure, unmoved, taunted him still, commanding that her death be his crucible, that loss should forge his power, echoing the lesson he once endured. He caught the crimson blade on its return and hurled it back with such force that the armored giant staggered, losing a hand and taking a strike across his chest plate. In that fleeting moment of weakness, the apprentice summoned lightning into the towering rods of the generator, binding their arcs together and drawing in their furious energy until he became a storm incarnate. He unleashed it all upon his master, the crackling torrent consuming armor and systems alike, forcing the dark figure to his knees in reluctant surrender. Yet the killing blow never fell, for a sudden intervention stayed his hand and pulled him back from the abyss. In truth, the duel had been shaped by purpose. His master's strikes were not meant to destroy, but to push him to the very edge, to tempt him into the shadows once more. A contest of wills, where survival mattered less than the fate of a soul. He spun back, catching the red blade mid-flight and hurling it with fury, striking his foe's hand and tearing through the armored chestplate. Seizing the moment, he summoned a storm of lightning, channeling raw power into the rods around the generator until the chamber itself roared with energy, then unleashed it all in a furious tempest that engulfed the Dark Lord. Though his enemy resisted with every shred of will, the very armor meant to protect him betrayed him, conducting the storm until his body failed and he fell to his knees in defeat. The apprentice nearly delivered the final blow, but was stayed at the last instant, his wrath checked before it consumed him entirely. Yet the battle had never been fought for survival alone. His foe had not sought victory by strength, but rather sought to bend him, to drag him back into the abyss of the dark, testing the line between destruction and temptation as their duel blazed with ruin. He never foresaw that his foe would wield the storm itself to tear open the weakness deliberately forged into his armor, a flaw designed to keep him bound in servitude. Each clash across his life bore a mark upon the Emperor's enforcers, some grueling puzzles of endurance, others humiliating defeats. Yet none equaled the ruin inflicted by the Jedi who had once been his brother. There was one duel above all, the crucible that explained the prison of his black suit. None of the scars of battle compared to the day of fire on Mustafar, when the might of Darth Vader broke beneath the blade of Obi-Wan. After blood had been spilled in the temple, after children had fallen, after vengeance had been wrought on the council, Anakin Skywalker was no more. When his wife sought to reach the man she loved, she unknowingly carried with her the hidden shadow of Kenobi. Words twisted into despair as she saw the monster he had become, and in that moment, when his delusion raged unchecked, Obi-Wan stepped forth to face him. His fall reached its breaking point as the once great champion of the Jedi, blinded by rage and betrayal, seized the very woman he swore to protect. Convinced she had turned against him and conspired with his closest ally to end him. Confronted, he was forced to release her as his former brother-in-arms denounced the twisted corruption that had consumed him, declaring that he had become the very evil he once swore to destroy. Darkness drowned his mind. Sacrifice and obsession had left him with nothing but hatred, and in that hatred, blame burned only for his old friend. Blue blades ignited in the furnace of Mustafar, clashing in a storm of fire and fury as two brothers, bound by war and shattered by fate, crossed sabers in a duel both terrifying and magnificent. Each strike echoed years of battles fought side by side, each movement refined to perfection, their forms locked in balance as the greatest duelists of their age. Speed and power carried them across the burning catwalks, their deadly dance raging like an unbroken storm, a final reckoning between light and shadow. On the burning bridges of the mining facility, two warriors clashed not only in skill but in spirit, each knowing the other so completely that every strike encounter felt like a reflection in a mirror. They had once been brothers in battle, sparring endlessly, shaping one another into masters of their craft. Now, one wielded elegance and patience, turning aside each furious blow with perfect defense, while the other, consumed by rage and darkness, unleashed an unrelenting storm. The duel raged across molten rivers, platforms, and machines, a dance of fire and steel, until the weary defender leapt to the high ground. In that single moment, with the advantage secured, the bond of brothers gave way to the inevitability of fate, and the Chosen One found himself trapped in a checkmate forged by his own fear. The Sith lunged with confidence, believing he could dictate the fight in any way he pleased, but arrogance clouded his judgment. Pride and hunger for power consumed him so deeply that he refused to acknowledge a warning from the master who knew him best. How dare the old man fail to see the greatness he now claimed as his own? Mocking the so-called high ground, he prepared to end the duel with the same maneuver once used on another fallen foe, convinced that this would prove his superiority and close the cycle forever. Yet the master foresaw it and spoke the final warning: don't try it. He tried anyway. But instead of triumph, he was met with a forbidden technique, a triple moi, an illegal strike in Jedi combat, designed to sever multiple limbs at once, outlawed for the agony it inflicted. In that moment, the would-be conqueror was undone, not by his power, but by his blindness to wisdom. On the burning slopes of Mustafar, the exhausted warrior faced an enemy once called brother, a fighter too fast, too strong, too overwhelming to overcome through strength alone. Reluctant to strike a killing blow, yet desperate to end the duel, he unleashed a forbidden sequence, 2 swift cuts, severing both legs and the last arm of his fallen foe. The broken figure tumbled helplessly down the embankment, rage burning hotter than the lava that soon ignited his limbs. Flames consumed his body, searing flesh, lungs, and spirit alike, stripping away not only his humanity but also the very essence of his power. In that moment of ruin, what could have been godlike was reduced to ruin, leaving only the shadow of what once was. Bound by only a fraction of his master's strength, the dark figure was left imprisoned in a shell of armor that tormented his every step, condemning him to endless pain and stripping away any hope of vengeance against the one who deceived him. That torment forged his greatest trial, a duel where no blow found purchase until the final moment, when his former brother's strike sealed his fate and reshaped him forever. These battles stand as the harshest trials he endured against the Jedi, each a crucible of strength and memory, each scar carved deeper than steel. From rivals who tested his limits to apprentices who turned against him, from conclaves of survivors to the fateful clash of father and son, the Chronicle reveals how every confrontation cut at more than flesh, reaching into the shattered remnants of the man he once was. Thus, the record closes upon a legacy of duels that define not only the fall of Anakin Skywalker, but also the eternal shadow of the Dark Lord.